Madam Chair, you are live.
Good evening, everyone. This is the February 22nd, 2023 meeting of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. I want to welcome everyone to this month's meeting. My name is Allison Colden. I'm the Vice Chair. I'll be chairing tonight's meeting, and I am from Ward 7. And I will let the rest of our AEC members introduce themselves, and then our new member, Jenny Janis, will introduce herself.
Good evening. My name is Bill O'Leary, member from Ward 2.
Jeremy Hansen, member from Ward 5.
Jenny Janis. I believe my ward is Ward 6.
Welcome. Tonight is Jenny's first meeting. So Jenny, do you want to just take 30 seconds or so and tell us a little bit about your interest in the AEC and maybe a little bit about your background?
Sure. I have practiced landscape architecture and planning for the last 10 years and have an interest in the Environmental Commission because of that background. My specialization over the course of my career has become nature-based solutions and green infrastructure. I taught a master's level class at the University of Texas in Austin, where I lived before moving back to Maryland. I grew up in Maryland, and we moved back about, I guess it's almost 3 years now. I grew up in Ocean City and very connected to the nature of the Eastern Shore. And the Chesapeake Bay is very near and dear to my heart.
Great. Well, thank you, Jenny, and welcome to the commission. We're very happy to have you on board. So,
Thank you.
We'd also like to welcome a couple special guests tonight. We have Councilwoman Lisa Rodvian joining us from District 6, as well as Jesse Iliff, Executive Director of the Severn River Association. So we will get to some presentations and discussions with them shortly. But first order of business tonight is the approval of the meeting minutes from our January 2023 meeting. Have you all had a chance to review the minutes, and are there any edits to the minutes?
I did review. I don't have any edits, but I don't know that we have enough members who were present at that meeting to approve them tonight.
Okay, we do have Linda who just joined. Hi, Linda.
Hi there.
Linda, could you just do a quick roll call with your name and ward?
My Linda Matthew.
What ward are you in, Linda?
What? I'm in Hunt Meadow.
Okay. And Paul has just joined us as well. Paul, do you want to do a quick roll call? Paul, you're on mute if you, there we go.
Take 2, Paul Murphy, Ward 2. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Allison.
Yeah. And Bill, thank you for flagging that. I wonder if we do have enough folks. Now we have 4 people who were on last month's call. Linda was on last month's call, but she wasn't a member at the time.
Right.
You have been sworn in now, right, Linda?
Yes,
Okay.
I am. I'm official.
Great. So I do think, unless Racine wants to jump in and correct me, that we have enough folks now for that vote. Paul and Linda, we were reviewing the minutes from the January 2023 meeting.
Yeah, I think for those that were present, you've got enough here to vote. I think
Yeah. We have 4 who were
Yeah,
present and
that were
sworn members.
present. Yes, yes.
Yep. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the 2023 minutes barring any edits?
I motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Seeing none, the January 2023 meeting minutes stand approved. Is there any objection to reordering our agenda to discuss new legislation and pending legislation so that we can have our discussion with Councilwoman Rodvian? Any opposition to that?
No.
All right. So first I will just cover, I did attend the February 2023 Environmental Matters Committee meeting where our first three pieces of legislation related to turtle safe curbs, bird safe buildings, and stormwater enforcement were discussed. Those have been pushed for further evaluation, amendments, and other discussions with city staff to the next Environmental Matters Committee meeting, which will be March 9th at 3 o'clock. So there aren't any from the Environmental Matters Committee updates on those three, but Jeremy, did you have any updates for the AEC at this point on your research on bird safe buildings?
No, I haven't touched base with Alderman Savage yet. I need to try pinging him again. He probably just
Okay.
hasn't seen my email.
Okay, if that's something that we can have ready, I mean, pending the discussion with the alderman before the March 9th Environmental Matters Committee meeting, maybe that's something that we all can review via email. Okay. All right, so at this point, we can turn it over to Councilwoman Rodvian to discuss some pending county legislation. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for including me, and thank you to Randy, who I don't know if he's here somewhere, but if he is, he encouraged me to join you guys. So thank you to including me. Hopefully in the next several weeks, or maybe at our next council meeting, I have a bill that I've been working on for a long time and actually was working on with Councilwoman Lacey before. It would also add a, oh shoot, my thing, it's saying internet connection unstable. Hopefully that's not causing any problem.
Yeah, your audio is cutting
We
out a
lost
little.
the,
Is it
yeah.
glitchy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want
Shoot.
to try turning off your video and see if that helps?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So, well, Councilwoman Lacey and I began working on this legislation to ban plastic bags for any sort of retail outlet in Anne Arundel County. And in addition to add a price floor that establishments would have to charge to anyone that took a paper bag. Of course, we already pay for these things, but to have the cost sort of explicitly laid out makes people aware that, you know, yes, indeed, there is a cost to these things. And this was based on the research that the Sierra Club has done in our region and across the state. Basically, that had determined that this approach was the best path towards getting people to change their behavior and start using completely reusable bags, to bring their own bags when they went to the grocery store or anywhere else that they were, you know, going to make purchases, that they'd have things to carry home with them. So, you know, we've lots of little different things that we had to think about that thankfully we've had some models around the state. I know Baltimore County just passed a bill. Baltimore City already has a ban. Howard County, Salisbury City, lots of things going on around in Washington, D.C. So we had a lot of good examples of where things were, you know, how things were playing out. And so we chose this approach and are looking forward to, you know, getting it introduced. An introduction of March 6th means that it would come for a public hearing in early April. So if this is, you know, something you're interested in, you know, just start looking for it in our first meeting in April. And I'm happy to answer any questions or tell you about anything else we've got going on.
Well, thanks. I'll open it up first to any questions from our commission members.
I know that, sorry, this is Bill. I know that there were a similar, sounds like a similar ban in Easton that took effect about 11 months ago. And they had, you know, a number of exceptions and things like that. But I was just curious if there was any feedback or if you knew of any feedback from Easton about how that their policy was accepted over there.
I can't say specifically. I know, again, I was really working with Sierra Club on the drafting of this bill, and I know that they have been following legislation around the state. So I would imagine that they have, been cued in, but I couldn't tell you specifically, if there are, are things that worked well or didn't work well.
Okay.
Paul, did you have a question?
Yes. First of all, I think all of us are very much for this, and Bill, when did we first start talking about this? 5 years ago, when
At
Ted
least.
was on board, at least. So first of all, we're all for it, and it just underscores how many people it takes to push the rock up the hill. But my question is, did you say the store has to charge the clients for the bag?
Correct. So it's not a tax.
Right. It's a
Because we,
cost.
right. So Anne Arundel County would have had to get authority from the state to actually have this kind of tax. But we got a letter from the Attorney General's office before Mr. Frosch left his position, indicating that our charter does have, at least his opinion is that our charter has enough breadth that would allow us to impose a price floor for paper bags and non-reusable bags.
Right. No, I'm all for that. I agree with you. A quart of oil and a car tire is a little bigger, but you go to the mechanic, they charge you $2 to dispose of a tire or oil. You go to the dentist, they charge you a little bit for their protection stuff. So I'm fine with that, but I just wonder, and I'm always the one who trying to do more carrots than sticks. As long as the shopkeeper is paying for the bags, and a little bit this is unintended consequences. I'm just questioning. I don't know, and it's great that you've looked across many of them, so you've got a body of work here. But I just wonder. There's definitely should be a cost to using the plastic bags in my mind, no doubt about it. But do we have to charge the client as opposed to, for whatever reason, a high-end store, maybe it's the little old lady, I don't know what, but do we have to charge the consumer each time, or can we just have the store pay the fee? And then I guess what's the question? I guess we're outlawing plastic bags. The store's buying the paper ones, and if they want to charge their consumers like that Lidl grocery store on Riva or Route 2, so my question is, how about just letting the shopkeeper decide to charge the consumer or not? And because you've worked with a number of entities, you probably have some good answers on that, good reasons why.
Yeah, so actually, this was an approach that the Retailers Association was willing to get behind because it puts all different size retailers on the same footing. One of the biggest concerns of implementing this kind of approach, where where they're required to charge 10 cents, and the law does, our bill would require that it's passed on to the consumer. But the idea is that it puts, whereas large retailers, very easily could have, the advantages of buying in, significant bulk that would almost allow them to absorb any cost that would be associated with paper bags, where a smaller retail might not be able to absorb it as easily. So requiring a minimum set price basically puts them on equal footing. So, they recoup their costs equally.
No, that's a very good point of not letting the big guys purchasing power and say, I'm not going to go to the little guy, go to the big guy because I get free bags. So, okay.
Yeah. Good question though. And thank you for this is good. At some point, I'm going to have to answer these same sort of questions in front of my colleagues and, who can come up with some very good questions. So I appreciate them all.
Not a small version of the peanut gallery you're going to face.
Yes.
And I have one question as well. Does the bill specify the use for the funds that are collected?
Since it goes back to, I just feel so horrible talking without my screen
It's
on. I feel like my face is
it's
part of my
working fine now.
communication. Okay, so hopefully if it doesn't get wonky again, I'm going to stay with my camera on. Um, because it goes to the retailers, they can do whatever they want. Presumably, they're going to use it to cover the cost of, the paper bags. But it's probably, I don't know if a paper bag actually costs 10 cents. The idea is really about changing behavior and just putting this marker like, hey, this is a cost that's out there. And not only is it a cost to your pocketbook, it's a cost to the environment and, getting the behavioral change. So they're really free to do whatever they want.
Thanks. Are there any other questions from commission members? No, we do have two new members or newer members on tonight. So I just want to give you all a quick history of the AEC's recent engagement on plastic bag ban legislation. So last summer, we had a presentation and a visit from the Sierra Club and some other advocates about this issue. And we heard some data from our, a local observation study of the usage of plastic versus paper bags in Annapolis. And the AEC did prepare a memo for city council members about our recommendations for plastic bag ban legislation. And at the last Environmental Matters Committee meeting, I brought that up with our Environmental Matters Committee members who requested that the AEC provide them a presentation at the March 9th meeting about plastic bag ban legislation and basically update our memo from September with all of the additional municipalities who have passed bans since we first drafted that memo. So that would include Salisbury, Baltimore County, and at least one other that I don't have on the top of my head. But, Councilwoman, if you are able or willing to share the legislation that you intend to introduce, I think obviously we see tremendous benefits of trying to be consistent between the city and the county. So if that's something that you're willing to share with us as members of the AEC, I think it sounds like you intend to introduce it prior to that meeting. So it seems like it would be in the public domain by that point. So that's something that we can review and make a specific recommendation to city council that they should consider something similar. That might be something we would be able to include after reviewing it.
Yeah, I would be happy to do that. Hopefully, as I said, it will be introduced March 6th. Is that a Monday? I think that's a Monday.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you for confirming that. Yeah, so March 9th, it'll be in the public sphere, and happy to share. And on a totally unrelated topic, I just heard a little bit about bird safe building. I introduced a bill at the county on this same topic. So I have accumulated a little bit of knowledge and a number of data sources and contacts. So if anyone's interested in that, please feel free to reach out to me because that's something that I had worked on as well. And I'm happy to share what I've learned and the contacts if they're not already in your, phone book.
Great. Thank you so much for that offer. Jeremy is our resident bird safe building researcher. So you're muted, Jeremy.
Thanks, sorry. Oh yeah, I'll follow up with you, Lisa.
Sounds good. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Were there any other things you wanted to touch on from the county level before we move on?
Just one last bill that's from the county executive's office to take out one of the environmental review requirements for projects that are actually intending to provide various types of environmental remediation. The idea that yes, you're going to cause some disturbance while you, in the process of creating the mediation or or remediation or some sort of I'm not thinking of the right word, but you sort of have to break a few eggs before you can make an omelet, I guess, and to acknowledge that the end result is going to be an improved environmental condition so those projects that are doing that kind of work would be exempt from having to, meet the burdens of showing what their impact would be, knowing that the long-term work would be better. It just reduces the costs for organizations that are doing those kind of projects. So I thought I'd let you know about that as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I can imagine that there's some organizations doing stream restoration projects and other BMP installations that
Exactly.
would be interested in that in the city.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions from folks? All right, seeing none. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining our meeting tonight. Feel free to hang on or enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care. All right, so I don't have any updates for some of the other pending legislation that is listed on tonight's agenda. So I think we could move on to our updates and presentations. And I wanted to now kind of open the floor up for Jesse Iliff. Jesse is the Executive Director of the Severn River Association, who is going to give us a general overview of their organization and what they're working on. Welcome, Jesse.
Thanks, Allison. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So as stated, my name is Jesse Iliff. I'm Executive Director of the Severn River Association. Our mission is to connect the people who live, work, and play on the Severn River to restore and protect it for all of our communities. That mission statement was drafted in 2021, a full 110 years after our organization was founded. SRA is actually the first group in the nation devoted to the preservation and protection of a river. We were founded in 1911. But that last part of our mission, to restore and protect this river for all of our communities, was written in recognition of the fact that for far too long, it was generally waterfront property owners, landholders, the privileged, the wealthy, the white, who drove the conversation about what was protected, when, and where. And that's true not just on the Severn, it's true for the conservation movement everywhere in the country. But this is Black History Month, and as much as I'd like to come here and say that things have totally changed, I can't do that. Lots of things have changed, but much remains to be done. And I wanted to speak with the commission tonight to plant a flag on that point and acknowledge the critical role that the voices of people of color have in the environmental movement, and to pledge on behalf of SRA to do our part to amplify and celebrate and empower those voices. But, voices are one thing, meaningful engagement is another, and a careful look at the movement to restore the Chesapeake Bay shows that while more people of color are lending their time and their talent and their voices, the resources to perform the work still flow through a lot of the same channels. And as Councilwoman Rodvian mentioned about stream restoration, just as we have to, from time to time, correct the course of a stream that's been damaged from the ill-considered decisions of the past, it's critical that we change the flow of resources from the ill-considered decisions of the past to repair damage done and provide a brighter future. Some progress is being made there, and I applaud that, but that's why I wanted to speak with you tonight, because to the extent the commission is able to influence the allocation of resources in the environmental movement in the city, I ask that you please urge for more inclusive and broad-based dissemination of those resources to communities that have been excluded from those allocations for too long. Movement's being made here, and I hope that the commission can help accelerate that movement. And one important way that I think the commission can do that is through supporting the implementation of the city's public water access plan, which would help to connect all of the communities in town to the water and help cultivate the sort of love for the river that people like me have been able to enjoy because of the privilege of being born into a family that had extensive waterfront access. If we want the environmental movement to succeed, then everyone needs to have that exposure and that love to build that grassroots constituency that it takes to affect important and paradigm shifting policy change. So as our mission statement says, we need to connect all of the communities to the river, and the public access plan is a great way to get there. I love the picture of having dozens of points throughout the city that anyone who wants to can just wander down to the public access point, and that there could be a boat that could take you around to various other places and take you to places like the Cars and Elkonia Beach, which was recently acquired by the city, which has great potential for a swimming beach if some of the old infrastructure can be removed from the area to make it safe to swim. And that's what I'm talking about resource allocation. That's going to take money. It's going to take the city diverting funds to contractors to make that place a safe place to be, but the water quality is good there. And if on a hot summer day, anybody that wants to get out and see the bay wide open from the view you can get there for free or for a nominal cost and spend a day on the beach and then take a ferry back to the public access point that's closest to their house and walk home. I think that's a beautiful vision. I think it's something that the AEC should work towards realizing as much as possible. So that's just one example. There's plenty more, but I don't want to take up too much time. I appreciate the time that you've given me, so I'll leave it at there. And thank you for letting me come speak with you tonight.
Thank you, Jesse. I know I can speak on behalf of some members of the commission when I say that we share in your objectives, goals, and concerns around access and equity in the city. And it's something that we continue to look at different opportunities. So I appreciate you bringing up the public access plan as well as some others, but we will actually be talking about that one specifically later on tonight. So are there any questions or comments for Jesse from members of the commission?
Yes.
Go ahead, Paul.
Hello, Jesse. Thanks for
Hey,
your
Paul.
work. Somewhat related, but it's coming up. It's topical because it's springtime. The city has their tree planting. And I know it's not quite water access, but it is community involvement and, how you get things going. So my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, the city used to give out trees for free and they would be planted in different neighborhoods. And it's supposed to, get people in each neighborhood to get slightly organized, work together and go plant some trees in their neighborhood. I realize that's not quite water access, but it is community involvement. And as I said, it's springtime. That's something I'd like to see the AEC somehow get a little bit more effort, because Bill Leary's been around for a while. I think the whole tree planting thing is underperformed in my eyes over the last few years. We're not getting as much civic engagement as I'd like, but so maybe the alder people reach out to their wards and try and find out who's active there. But and some of those trees could, of course, be planted closer to water areas. So that's just my thought, Jesse.
Yeah, well, I mean, whether they're planted right on the water or not, they're going to infiltrate stormwater and make for cleaner water so that those who choose to go down to a public access point, whether to fish or to swim or just to sit and watch a heron go fishing, they're going to have a better experience.
Yeah.
And what we do on the land matters. And if, again, it's a resource thing. If the city is able to allocate resources to provide trees to communities that want them, then it should. And it should prioritize those communities that have been historically under-resourced to try and level that playing field a little bit more and make, help people cultivate the sense of love and stewardship for the waterways that that everybody needs.
Okay. Thank you. And I know it's back to incumbent upon us in the AEC to connect with others. Where are we coming into the back half of March, and that thing is usually around Earth Day, April 20. We're probably 2 months away. And so I'm just saying to everyone, kind of spread the word and try and find people who in your community are interested in doing that. We plan, I'm over we planted a couple of trees in our area, and it's nice. They've grown a little bit. And anyways, we all know what the tree planting's about.
Anne Arundel Watershed Stewards Academy might still have some left over from some projects that they had received funding for in the past. Like, I want to say 2 months ago or so, they reached out to me and to SRA and some other groups to say, hey, we've got these, a lot of Atlantic white cedars, but a couple other species of trees as well. And those are, that species in particular is especially good if there are any low-lying areas that tend to accumulate water. They like wet feet. Their roots do well being saturated. And I know that there are plenty of neighborhoods throughout town that have sort of gray infrastructure in place, which is not always effective at infiltrating stormwater. And if there are areas that pond up in rainstorms, that's exactly the sort of tree that you want there, because they soak that up.
Okay, thank you.
I'm new to this group, but I just want to kind of chime in a little bit here, because what I've seen in some of these kinds of programs in the past is especially for areas with smallish lots, people are a little hesitant to install larger shade trees and things like that grow quite big. And so I don't know, I'm not familiar with the program, so I could be, you could already be doing this, but the diversity in the types and sizes of trees and even beneficial native shrubs could encourage more people to partake, and you still get some benefit there. Just a thought.
Yeah, and Jenny, they did present, Watershed Stewards Academy did present at the Environmental Matters Committee meeting, and it was pretty much on Replant Annapolis, which is a planting program that the city supports. And you were exactly right. That was exactly what they noted, is that there were a lot of trees going in the ground and a lot of interesting projects and people participating, but that there were a few of the larger shade trees going in and more of dogwoods and other smaller trees.
I have a copy of the Watershed
Presentation.
Stewards Academy presentation on their first year and the number of trees they planted and what's going on with that. And I will send that out to the commission.
Thank you, Racine. All right. Any other questions or comments for Jesse? All right. Well, Jesse, I just want to say on behalf of the commission, thank you for everything that SRA does in our community. We appreciate you all as a partner, and thank you for coming out and speaking with us tonight. And if we can be of assistance at all, you know where to find us.
Thank you all. I appreciate that offer. I hope I don't become too much of a pest to you folks. I am gonna drop off and go have dinner with my kids. So take care, guys.
Enjoy.
Thank you for inviting me over.
Thanks.
Thank you very
All right. Well, it looks like we have Eric Lashinsky on. So if we could promote him to a panelist. I believe maybe he's on to discuss the public water access plan. Welcome, Eric. He's just connecting now. Hi, good evening, Eric.
Hey, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
All right.
Would
Good to
you
be
happen to
with
be
you.
here to chat with us about the access plan?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly why I'm here.
Great.
I caught the tail end of Jesse's remarks, so it was a good segue. I don't know how much he talked about the public water access plan, but I kind of heard the end of it. Thanks for having me. I was looking back. It looks like I gave a presentation back in July, so it felt like it was more recent, but a lot has happened since then. So I'm happy to be able to share the progress. Let me, I just have a few slides to talk about. 1 second. Can you all see this?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
All right. Good deal. So, we kicked off this plan last May. It's pretty historic in my opinion, even though, it's something we've needed as a city for a long time and people have been talking about it for a long time. We've made a lot of progress over the years in creating various public water access points. But things really came to a head during the Maritime Task Force process last year, which wasn't really intended to be about public water access. It was really about the maritime industry, the economy around maritime services, and inevitably, because our maritime zone districts are on the waterfront and there are a lot of street end parks and other waterfront parks in those areas, the discussion evolved into really being pretty heavily focused on public water access in terms of how property owners in the maritime districts could assist in expanding and enhancing the public water access we have. And we were fortunate to have Wendy O'Sullivan on that task force, who's the superintendent for the National Park Service's Chesapeake region. And she was very supportive of this recommendation to do a citywide public water access plan and offered up National Park Service funding for that. So this slide was from that Maritime Task Force strategy report, and it really gelled into essentially the scope for our plan, which includes these 5 items. Some of this may be familiar to you. If you remember my last presentation, it was probably in that presentation, but this quote at the top pretty much summarizes what we're going for here. I mean, it's about identifying concrete steps the city and its partners. That's important because the city can't do it all. Things that we can do to improve, enhance, expand water access within and adjacent to the city limits. And it's also important because we are partnering with Anne Arundel County on a number of projects, and they kind of have the same needs and goals regarding more equitable public water access. So even though our plan is more focused on the city, there are some ongoing projects around the city that we're trying to promote. This is an important slide because we do get questions, and there's a lot of confusion on what public water access actually means. And this was a definition that came out of the Maritime Task Force that ended up being part of a zoning update so this is actually in our city code now, and it has more specific relevance to the development of new restaurants on the waterfront. That was kind of a big discussion item during the Maritime Task Force study. The idea that new restaurants are desired. There was a lot of consensus that the city could use more waterfront dining, and but then there was also this concern that that's not really unconditional public water access. You have to be a patron, and so this idea that any new restaurant or business really that opens up on the waterfront should be required to provide public water access, where you don't need to be a patron of that business to enjoy it. And this is kind of the definition that we came up with after a lot of discussion. So it's very broad. I mean, you can see a few bullet points that identify some of the things that should happen in these water access locations. But importantly, it's not necessarily meaning that you're going to be able to get in the water in those locations or put a paddle craft in the water, but you're simply being able to come to the waterfront and enjoy it, the view, relax, walk along the water. This example from the Chop Tank restaurant is sort of an example of what that might look like. You know, just making sure that particularly off hours, you know, that waterfront is sort of accessible, open to the public. And this is kind of a starting point within our public water access plan. I think we're going to be providing something that's not necessarily specific to businesses, but also public parks and such. So this is, you know, seemingly simplistic map of our existing water access points. It was surprisingly challenging to create because a lot of our existing water access points aren't necessarily managed by the same entities within the city. We have some that are managed by our Department of Rec and Parks, some by Public Works. We have privately managed public spaces. We have some sites that are just easements, you know, where the activities that can happen there are very unclear. There's no good signage. And so let me zoom in for a sec, because I mean, I probably shared a version of this early on, but we've added some sites here. It kind of gets updated every few weeks as we learn of some new sites that, you know, generally the dark blue points are pretty consistent. Those are the ones that the city manages as existing city parks. Many of those are street end parks. The orange dots are public access easements. So 22 is the Wells Cove site, and 40 is the site across from the Eastport Democratic Club. And these are sites that candidly do not have signage. You know, you'd never know that they were public. It's sort of embarrassing, you know, that they should be more accessible. And, you know, at least with the Wells Cove site, I mean, that was a site that was negotiated, you know, 30 years ago and just never really formalized. So we really need to improve on that. These kind of easements will continue to be created, you know, when new developments happen and other types of water access are negotiated through that process. And we just want to be proactive in the future to not let something like the debacle at Wells Cove happen again. And the purple dots are planned sites, planned city parks. So we have Hawkins Cove here by Truxton. We have the Cars Beach that Jesse was talking about on the bay. We have Gateway Park is number 43 here off of Route Boulevard. I could talk more about that. I think I may have given a brief presentation about that actually at a previous presentation, or maybe it was suggested. And then on Weems Creek in West Annapolis, there's this new street and park at Tolson Street that was recently dedicated, and it's a site that the neighbors have been stewarding for many years. It's not much more than a trail down to the water, and it's pretty overgrown with Phragmites, but we're going to be planning a direction forward for that site. And then you have the sort of bright green are privately managed open spaces. So 19 is the Chesapeake Children's Museum. Some of these are leases from the city. So they're city property, but they're managed by other entities. The Crab Facility, Chesapeake Region Accessible Boating is one. technically, I guess, the Maritime Museum manages campuses at Ellen Moyer and at 2nd Street. So those are not identified that way, but I guess they would that. You have St. Luke's is number 36. Thompson Street is over here, which a lot of people just identify as a city park, but we still need to formalize that. It's technically not a city park today. And then you have St. John's waterfront is number 2. And then, light green is our city parks, and darker green is the county parks. And then we have a version of this that's regional. So it goes up to Greenberry Point in the north and Cirque, the Smithsonian site in the south, and just to try to understand the larger context. But we've also done blow-ups of each creek shed that give a little more detail and aerial views. We also overlaid that map with social vulnerability. These are criteria that come from the CDC that really try to help us give a baseline for where socially vulnerable communities exist in the city. I mean, I think most people live here could anecdotally, know where some of these. It's a combination of income, language, access to vehicle, housing. It's about 15 different criteria, and you can see that a lot of those areas aren't necessarily on the water, but the ones that are have 2 sites that are current projects, and these have just been long deferred projects that finally have a lot of momentum, which is great. I'm happy to say, and one of them is Hawkins Cove on Spa Creek. It's in the vicinity of our largest public housing community. It's a site that is next to Truxton Park, but it's kind of off the map today. I mean, it's just not. A lot of people don't know how to access it. A lot of people who live in the adjacent communities cut through to get to Truxton Park. So we got funding in the last couple of years to advance the design of a living shoreline here and a community park. Funding came from the Chesapeake Bay Trust and National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and we just did we issued an RFP just a few weeks ago. There was a lot of interest in that, and I think our proposals are going to come back in about 2 weeks. So that project is moving forward well. And then on College Creek, this is an image of Robert Eads Park, which is at the kind of the headwaters. It's number 4 on the map, and that project is getting close to actually construction. We're at sort of 65% design, but it's a relatively small site, and I think we may be breaking ground in the summer. And the scope is relatively limited. It's primarily about taking out some of the existing infrastructure there, kind of revegetating and putting an accessible path down to the water. And then there's a memorial to the neighborhood activist and advocate, Robert Eads, that I think is a really exciting project. It's a collaboration with a local artist, Commacel Brown. And I'm really thrilled about that component of the park. So that project will, it's not actually going to take a lot of time to build. So, I mean, I think by the end of the fall, it might be active. And there's a phase 2 that's a much larger project that we're fundraising around that would actually double the size of the park. Let's see. So not going to spend much time on this, just to say the city dock project is a separate initiative. It's kind of happening in parallel to our public water access plan. It had a head start, and I think the public water access plan is essentially focusing on everything else in the city. I mean, we will be providing some recommendations for the end of Prince George Street, where you see the tall ship, and that's outside of the scope for the CDOC project. And it's one of our street end parks. Commodore Barry Park is the technical official name for that site. But otherwise, the CDOT project is ongoing, and we just want to be coordinating with that. We did a pretty extensive community survey outreach for this project. We got about 500 responses to the English language, 16 responses to a Spanish language version. I think it's still not where we need to be in terms of representative sampling of the population, but we tried some new things to get the word out, worked with Annapolis Transit, school system. We did a number of events to kind of go to communities, and we use the QR codes to really try to make it as easy as possible for folks to chime in. And we're not going to be doing much more on this community survey at this point. We're really in the mode of producing the plan, but factoring in all the feedback we received. We did 3 focus groups on different topics, most recently last week, and Randy was part of that. He actually this was the second one. I don't think he was at the last one, but he was at the first 2. We get I felt like a pretty diverse group of people at each one. The last one, partnerships, was really focused on organizations, businesses, property owners that are either already partnering with the city on water access projects or should be, and talk just expansively about what those kind of partnerships should look like. We've recorded all of those conversations, and you could go to, we have a dedicated website. If you go to our 2040 comprehensive plan website on the city's page, it's actually, if you click on, you go to the main city website, at the bottom, there's a link for a comprehensive plan, and then this public water access plan is being done sort of in line with the comprehensive plan. You click on that, and then computer may be moving faster than mine. Let's see if we can get to the public water access page here. Really, all I wanted to point out were the recordings of the focus groups, if you're interested. Apparently that is proving to be difficult. I'm gonna just, I guess you'll have to take my word for it, but here we go. So yeah, they're listed here. We have the YouTube links that'll pop up in a second, and this is really where we've been putting any information about the project. So we have a link here to our needs assessment report, which was issued over the summer. Go back to the presentation. That needs assessment report came out of a site inventory we did. And I should have acknowledged that, in addition to National Park Service being the funder and partner on this, they brought in a group called the Volpe Center, which is a innovative think tank type entity that's part of the U.S. Department of Transportation. Frankly, I never knew existed. They do a lot of research initiatives for different government agencies, and they've been our consultant on this project. So they constructed this inventory process. We went to every existing water access site and looked at these 7 categories. We had different criteria, and we just basically, using an online punch list type format, identified needs and made observations, and have a pretty solid database of those metrics, which went into this report. And I feel like looking at all the metrics, I pull out these 4 here just to identify what I think of as key equitable access indicators that we can use to measure how accessible our water access sites are. And not doing very well. Sidewalks, not too bad. That's really kind of the one metric here that we're doing okay on. And even those, I don't think we necessarily looked at whether they were ADA accessible. So just simply whether they connect or not. And all these others are things we need to improve on. So finally, next steps, we are working on a actual plan document, which will be our strategic plan. It'll identify things that we need to do to improve, basically priority actions for all of our existing sites. And then also you see opportunities for new and improved water access. We have a lot. It's always amazing to me to learn of new places in this small city that I never knew existed, that are opportunities within neighborhoods. I mean, the Tolson Street one was a real revelation in West Annapolis, and to learn that there were residents there that had been maintaining that and really excited to turn that into a new public site. Sometimes I just think that that there's not enough interest within our neighborhoods to create those sites, but there is, and we're trying to be supportive of those initiatives. Standards for equitable public water access. That essentially means, what should be the baseline for it, when we look at a place like Tolson Street, which we're essentially going to be creating a new water access site from scratch. What should it have to be, as welcoming and accessible as possible? What does it need as sort of its basic park infrastructure? That's sort of what we're looking for there. Program partnership initiatives, alternative mobility. You all are probably aware of the electric ferry project. That would be one of the projects that will be featuring in this alternative mobility initiatives. And the action plan will really summarize, the projects that we'll look to do in the short term and midterm and long term. We're working on a sort of, in addition to the plan document, we're working on a water access mapping tool that's using the Esri GIS story map application. And this is going to be a tool that we hope residents and visitors to the city can use. I'll give you just a snapshot of what that looks like. It's pretty rough right now, but for example, we have the photography will be much improved in the future. This is just a file photo that we use, but this is Burnside Street, and so you could scroll down, thumbnails of every water access site in the city. The map is going to load in a minute, and you'll see. Basically, this is just sort of the main mapping tool, but the idea is that there would be themed maps around different types of activities. So I'll wait for this to load, and then I'll kind of zoom in. So you can click on the map, or you can click on individual sites. I'll just say, I'll click on Lafayette, and obviously my computer's working slowly, but it zooms in, gives you better sense of the context. You get a sense of other locations nearby that you may have not been aware of. If maybe Lafayette Avenue Park is busy, you want to go to another site, you can do that. And we have some basic information here on the left, particularly water access, site access. There's a link to Google Maps. In the National Park Service is actually hiring a writer that's going to help us develop better interpretive narratives around each site that we can use for this website and also future signage. So I'm really excited about that. But the water access, this is just an example of, a theme map that's, you see most of our sites do have some sort of paddle access, but it varies. You have some bulkhead conditions, you have some beach access. We're sort of debating in some cases, like Hawkins Cove, the access is pretty rough right now. We're trying to determine how much we want to encourage people to actually use sites that aren't really as accessible as they should be. But that's something we're working through right now. I do also want us to say, one thing we're doing with this map that's also important is kind of putting other information on here that shows transit, bike routes. If you look at the downtown sites, there's major parking assets in orange. And we're trying to figure out how to put the legend on this map to be a little more clear. That's a problem right now, but we're really just trying to give people the tools to use these sites as easily as possible. Last slide, signage has been a topic of discussion for years, and it really it's sort of the basic improvement that we believe is needed to, at minimum, make sure people know these sites are public and they're welcoming and kind of on the map, so to speak. We have the metrics on the left to point out how we're doing on that. It's pretty bad in terms of the wayfinding. A lot of these sites don't even have basic identifying signage. So we really want to improve on it. We applied for a grant recently with the Chesapeake Gateways Network grant program. That's a National Park Service grant program. And the aim is to do a design manual that would develop signage designs that we could then have fabricated and try to clean up these sites. A lot of them have overlapping signage from different eras. It's almost like you can see every time we got a grant to do something new, it ended up with signage at some of these sites and maybe not others. And then just, it gets tacked on top of each other over time. And so there's a lot of outdated information, and just really want to make everything as consistent as possible and clear. And there's a lot of stories to tell through the interpretive signage. So I'm excited about that. But it's really a mixed bag, as you probably all know. You go from site to site. So that's where we're at. I think the work is going to be done by the summer. That's the plan. We're just sort of in production mode right now. And I'll be excited to share the draft plan when we have it. I think it'll be something good for you all to review and see if there's things that we can add, particularly from an environmental perspective.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Eric. It's always great to have you come and present. I always learn so much about what's going on and assets that I didn't know about. So thank you. Are there any members of the commission who have questions or comments for Eric?
No. Oh, Eric, early in your presentation, first of all, thank you for your time. Early in your presentation, you mentioned one, it may have been a cove, a location that you, I don't know if you said it was a disaster or a mess, but one that you didn't think was right. Which spot was that?
Wells Cove. It's really nothing more than a clamshell path to Spa Creek between a couple of houses. It doesn't really have a sign today. You can't get in you can't access the water from there. Some of the neighbors were really just, they wanted to be able to put a paddle craft in the water. They wanted to potentially get picked up by a water taxi there. It's a really tight site, but it happens to fall in one of the gaps between, it's it's between Burnside Park and Truxton,
Mhm.
which is a significant gap in Eastport. And so there was a lot of advocacy around it. I mean, I think the tragic thing about it is that it was negotiated when a housing development was built in the 80s, and then it just never really got formalized. And then it's just that there's not, at this point, there's not a lot of clarity about, I think there was some disagreement about, who rights to the water in that location. And just, I think for me, it was a lesson that, we just have to, we have to just be more strategic. We know that water access is a major goal of the city at this point, and we're trying to hold on to the public water access we have, make sure it doesn't erode. There's definitely risks to our public water access everywhere, and we just have to be vigilant. And so that Wells Cove, it is technically a public site, and we will be putting signage there to identify it, but today it's not well marked. So
Eric, when you said this is moving along sort of in conjunction with the comp plan, could you just remind us kind of, and this is going to be targeted completion in the summer. Do you have an update for us on kind of the progress of the comp plan and when you expect to roll that out?
I sure do. We're working on the draft. We've been working on the draft for a while. We're getting pretty close. I gave a presentation to the Planning Commission last week. We laid out the land use approach within the comp plan, and that presentation is on the comp plan website, the video of it and the PDF. But I shared a schedule in that presentation. Essentially, we're aiming to have a draft plan to present to the Planning Commission in May, which would then start a 60-day public comment period, at the end of which there would be a series of public hearings led by the Planning Commission. And this is Maryland state law that the comprehensive plans have to be led through the Planning Commission and ultimately then delivered to the City Council. So we're following that process. But the 60-day comment period would be May, June, somewhere around there. And we would be providing a mechanism for folks to provide comments on the website, provide the draft plan in digital or print form, and we'll probably be providing some webinars just to kind of give overviews of the plan. We're actually been working on some short videos to promote some key themes within the comp plan, so I'm excited about that. Thank you to Julian and Madeline and Mark in the TV studio. But that's really what, in an ideal situation, it gets to the City Council in the early fall, and then that starts an adoption process, which could take months. So it's really hard to know that the City Council can, make changes at that point. But we're really looking for the Planning Commission to approve the draft with revisions based on comments heard, and hopefully nothing that is gonna say you have to go back to the drawing board. But something we can just give to the City Council with recommendations for certain revisions that they can then review.
Great, thanks for that. I think
Sure.
if it's appropriate or helpful to you all in rolling that out, maybe the AEC could organize something with our group as well as the the watershed groups and other environmental organizations in the city and county, to kind of get us all in one space if there's a webinar or presentation that you would be interested in presenting to that community.
That's a good idea. The comp plan is structured in these three visions for the city. You have the thriving city, the functional city and the adaptive city. The adaptive city, the chapters that fit into that are environmental sustainability and water resources, and not say environmental themes are in other chapters, but we're probably going to have a webinar on each of those three visions, and the one that's the adaptive city would probably be a good one to sort of be hosted by the Environmental Commission and maybe other groups. So, yeah.
All right. Great. Well, we will keep that in mind moving into the May, June timeframe. Any other questions or comments for Eric?
Thank you, Eric.
Yes, thank you,
I
Eric, for your time. Appreciate it as always. I look forward to using that mapping tool. It looks really interesting, and might find some new places to go take my kayak. So thank you.
Actually, before I go, I want to put a plug in. I already mentioned this to Randy. We have been spending quite a bit of time on strategy for tree canopy expansion, preservation in the city within the comprehensive plan. It's been challenging to sort of look at, you know, as you know, and Jesse touched on planning. We are seeing that as a very critical cross-cutting issue, you know, just in terms of the different goals that it can address. And I wanted to share our approach to that at your next meeting, if there's time on the agenda. So I shared that with Randy. I could probably send the same request to you, Allison, but hopefully there's time. And we would have Brian Adams, the city forester, joining as part of that. So I think that we would be just looking for your feedback on it. I mean, it's complicated, but I think it would be valuable discussion.
Yeah, I think we would be interested in that. So if you have something worked out with Randy, that's fine, or want to follow up with me, that's great too. We appreciate that opportunity, Eric.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Good to be with you.
Thanks so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
See you. Sure.
All right. So I think that brings us to the point in the agenda for any staff updates that Racine may have for us. Hi, Racine.
Hi. I don't have a lot in updates. I'll share what I shared with the Environmental Matters Committee about the pollinator garden at the solar park. It's been about a year or longer that we have been looking into using the land around the solar panels at the Annapolis Solar Park for a pollinator garden. And there are two approaches to installing the pollinator garden. One is a chemical approach, and one is a non-chemical approach. And either approach is done in order to prepare the area for planting of the pollinator garden. So with the chemical approach, an herbicide would be used to burn what they call burn off the grass that is there in order to prepare for a pollinator garden. Once that's done, you have to wait a year. And then after a year, you plant your pollinator garden. And then it takes about 3 years for pollinator garden to establish itself. And there's some maintenance that's involved in that. The second approach, which is the non-chemical approach, would be to mow, aerate, and seed. And what happens is there's turf grass that's up there now. And I've walked the site with a landscaper, and there's some native grasses that are up there that are mixed in with the turf grass, but there's turf grass up there. And what you would do is you would mow that down, toward the end of the year, November-ish part of the year, mow, then aerate the ground, and then you would go ahead and seed the ground. And it, you know, initially you get a small percentage, maybe 25% of pollinator garden to grass, but over time, over a 3-year period of time, that percentage of pollinator garden grows to grass. And so there's a difference in cost with each approach. The less costly approach is the chemical approach, and the more costly approach is the non-chemical approach. Let's see, what else is there? Allison, you were there. Did I miss anything? Is there something I should add?
No, I think you did a good job. I would just let some members of the commission know that since I was in attendance of the meeting, I took the liberty of speaking to a preference for a non-chemical approach, if at all possible. So I just wanted everybody to know.
Right. So what I was thinking of is that the chemical approach is much more expensive than the non-chemical approach is much more expensive than the chemical approach. And that's because it's more labor intensive. But the pollinator garden will still establish itself over about a 3-year period of time. So right now we're working with Novus Renewables. The city is talking to them. They are the company that runs the solar park. They manage the solar park. And so we're trying to find out where they stand as far as how much they want to participate in a project like this, whether or not they would allow a project like this and whatnot. So we're waiting to hear back from them to get an idea of which direction we're going to go in and why. And that's where that stands. We are also, Jackie, I'm working with Jackie right now also on a plastic-free policy for city offices, city departments, offices, buildings, events, and so on and so forth, plastic-free policy for the city. So that's in process right now, and we'll have updates as that goes along. That's pretty much all I have.
Okay, thank you, Racine. And one of the programs, I'm not sure if it's appropriate. I was just doing a little Google research on the side. What I mentioned, I think, in the meeting, that there might be some grant programs available to cover the cost of the pollinator habitat that's above and beyond the cost of the chemical approach. I was thinking of the Chesapeake Wild program, Racine. But there might be some others as well. So, you know, if anybody on the commission is familiar with any grant programs that might help the city cover the cost of installing a pollinator garden, please send them to Racine.
Okay, so Allison, I made note of that. If any, yeah, go ahead and send any kind of information like that to me. I welcome that. We're looking for as many funding sources as we can find. We're trying to get it in as a CIP, a capital improvement project. And I think that's going to go through, but that doesn't guarantee funding. So it's something that we're working on.
Great. Are there any questions for Racine?
Yeah, I have a question. Is this anticipated to be planted in between the solar panels? Is that, or around the edges of the?
Okay, so that has not been determined at this point. When I'm looking at the site and aerial photos, there's a fence line around the solar park.
Right.
Okay. And outside of that fence line, the company Novus Renewables, it right now mows to a
Mhm.
certain extent. And I don't know what extent that is, whether it's 10 feet or 20 feet outside that fence line, but there's mowing that takes place there. So wherever that mowing is taking place, planting can replace it as far as a pollinator garden. And if it's outside the fence line, then it's not going to interfere with the solar arrays. Now, inside the fence line there's a perimeter, so to speak, of grassy area around the solar panels.
Mhm.
And I would say definitely planting the periphery, but it has not been decided on whether or not we would plant in between the solar panels. But my thought is that even if we don't plant in between the solar panels, over time, a pollinator garden will migrate between the solar panels.
Mhm.
And also, just to let you know, there are all kinds of plants that, can be planted from very, very short to very, very tall. And we're talking about planting some pollinator plants that are not going to be are not going to interfere with the solar panels. And the lowest point of the solar panels is 12 inches above the
Mhm.
ground.
Mhm. Yeah. My experience with this is they always mow because of the tree seedlings that pop up. But if there is funding available, this is always
Well,
the challenge is maintenance.
yeah, right. I'm sorry to
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
They mow right now for a cost of about 40,000 a year.
Okay.
Okay. And if we put in a pollinator garden, that would have to be mowed once a year.
Right.
So there's a difference in cost there.
Yeah. Agreed. I agree with that. Okay, so that's good. I also just want to vote for I'm very familiar with how many projects use Roundup and why they use it and the science behind it dissipating in a certain amount of time. But I do know that there's also question about it affecting bees and beehives and things like that. So I'm also for the non-chemical approach if that can happen.
Yeah, that pretty much is what I'm hearing. And that's what we heard from the Environmental Matters Committee and Alderwoman, I should say, Tierney. Jenny, do you know of any studies that were done that I could reference that talk about the effects of something like glyphosate, and other herbicides that are popular on
Yeah, I mean,
now?
yeah, I mean, there has been someone who's won a lawsuit because of cancer from using glyphosate from Monsanto. And so there definitely is research out there on glyphosate, on the use of the damaging use of it on humans as well as bees.
Yeah, can you help me find that or send it to me or send a link to me? Because that's very important.
Yeah.
Having studies to sort of back up what we're saying.
Okay.
Racine,
Yeah.
what is the approximate cost difference between the chemical and the mowing way?
Okay. So the price that I'm going to quote, I need everyone to know these are cost estimates.
Yeah.
And nothing is finalized. So they could change drastically for either one. So for the chemical approach, the number that I have is 70 to 100,000 to prepare the land, meaning burn off the grass, and then plant, and then wait a year and then plant and do the maintenance after. And then the other price is 350,000 to 400,000 for the non-chemical approach, but it's much more labor intensive.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm not kidding here, and a few of you, well, first of all, Racine, I just emailed you a roundup of, or a lawsuit stretching all the way back into the 80s. So that, you know, this has been known for a while, but the cancer causing. Goats are used occasionally to clean up areas. They're really good
Right.
on crevices and ravines and
Right.
nasty, you know, stuff with pricklies on it where a human wouldn't want to do it. This is a little bit more open, but yeah, that's a price spread, but I cannot see any way at all we want to endorse use of chemicals. That's still, you know,
Right. And like I said, that's the feedback that I'm getting, Paul.
yeah.
And we did look into goats and sheep. We would not want goats because goats jump and we don't want them jumping on the solar panels. We want people to use, you know, alternative energy, and we want that energy to work all the time. So the other option is sheep. And I talked to a woman who runs a goat and sheep herd kind of business in Maryland. And the cost that she gave me, again, not written in stone, could change, so on and so forth. The price that she gave me was approximately $50,000 for employing sheep to go up there and help us instead of mowing once a year and have the sheep do it once a year. But right now, they're only paying 40,000 to mow every year. And in order for us to get them, or meaning Novus Renewables, or to get people on our side, this has got to be economically advantageous for them as well.
Agreed, but so hang on, I might be a little confused here. I understand they spend 40 grand a year, approximately 40 grand a year to maintain it. If we did the slash and burn with the chemicals, which is, so what you're talking about is burning everything away, right?
That's in preparation for a pollinator garden, yes.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea to put some cancer causing stuff in the roots of the plant so the bees can be full of cancer and, you know, and then my honey is. But so what you're saying is, getting back on an honest track here, the cost of the chemical way is much greater, significantly greater than the annual maintenance. But what you're talking about is because they're not just mowing the grass, they got to get rid of it, right? So we're doing almost, you know, getting rid of all the ability of the current vegetation or current grass to grow. Is that what needs to happen?
Well, okay, so yes and yes and no. So what happens is if you go the chemical route, you spray and then you wait. You have to wait at least a year before you plant. That's for sure. But we also spoke with people and a scientist over at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service supports the chemical approach versus the mowing, aerating, and seeding approach. The scientist that we spoke to, and I don't have his name right now, but he said that even, I mean, if you want to take the cleaner route, it's still very aggressive because when you mow, then turtles get chewed up and snakes get chewed up and little lizards and, other little critters get chewed up as well. So neither approach, he was saying, is absolutely, perfect.
Fair enough. But so for me to understand, the cost, even the less expensive way, the chemical way, is to not just mow it down to, like call it a haircut down to a really, really small, but you're also getting rid of the roots and the seedlings so the grass does not grow back. Is that basically what they're doing? Or that?
I don't know how to answer that. All I know is it supposedly it burns off the grass.
Yeah.
You wait a year and then you're able to plant.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So they're basically trying to get rid of what's growing every year. So, well, obviously I don't think there's anyone in this committee that thinks we should use a chemical. And isn't it interesting? They say you have to wait a year. Like, yeah, no kidding. I think we ought to push further on finding, if an animal route like a sheep route would do it. Or the other thing is, this might, it's not really technical work, right? It may be hard work, physically hard work, but it's not ungodly technical. This might be an opportunity for some of these youths to get some work experience, and it could be a lot less, wouldn't it be nice if we pushed around a little bit? And I don't know if it's a youth corps, whatever you want to call it, but we've talked about trying to have more employment for locals and the environmental stuff. This is not a skilled job, so it wouldn't be hard to train people up to have locals do this on the cheap, and pay them less than what a private company is paying people.
I can't answer, anything to that.
It's just a thought. There's nothing really to chew on. But.
Yeah.
Racine so what is the plant matter? I've been out there, but it's been a while. It's determined that it's not native. It's not enough.
Yeah. So I was out there with a landscaper, and he's got property over on the Eastern Shore. So regionally, he's familiar with plants and what is it, fauna, and so on and so forth in this area. So there's definitely turf grass that's planted there. There are some native grasses that are growing there. And he said the native grasses do have a tendency to grow kind of tall.
Mm-hmm.
So that would absolutely require that the mow happens once a year at the very least. There's also, as far as invasives, he didn't say that he saw anything more than Bermuda grass out there. And he was saying that, you can try to get rid of Bermuda grass, but it's always going to be there. So, you learn to live with Bermuda grass, and it also can grow to be pretty tall. So that would also encourage mowing once a year. But that's what he saw while he was out there. He didn't see anything else. Now, also, if you mow once a year, any trees that try to volunteer would be addressed, at least seen, if they're not physically removed. That's the non-chemical way is to physically pull them out of the ground. And maybe there's equipment. I'm sure there probably is equipment that you can use to pull these kinds of things out of the ground. But if you mow once a year, then you get to see any kind of trees that volunteer themselves and address that, and you address the native grasses as well as the Bermuda grass that's growing tall or can grow tall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only other thing that I will add to this conversation is that after looking at the aerial and hearing the conversation, it seems to me like maybe choosing a substantial section of that exterior area to do a starter project could make sense.
Well,
And
Jackie mentioned the potential for us to maybe work with the University of Maryland on a study of some kind,
Mhm.
where we could take a look at, chemical versus organic approaches to planting pollinator gardens, or maybe there's some other scenario that can be set up. But I have not, this week, I apologize, I have not had time to follow up on this. I contacted somebody at the University of Maryland. He was really excited with the idea, said he was going to check around, but I haven't heard back yet. So that's yet another approach that could be taken there.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Racine? I'm glad we got some good information out on this pollinator habitat issue.
Mhm.
Racine, I live next to St. Anne Cemetery, also known as Smokey's 12-acre dog park. And they recently, so I think most of you know, this is between Clay Street and Rowell Boulevard. So exiting town, you go over College Creek. So exiting town, we're on the left or the up creek side. But the church just put in a pollinator garden last year, and they received some grants. And so I see them out there. The retirees are out there tending to the garden. I'll find out where they got grants, but yeah, it looks nicer, and it helps. And what else we can say? They also, this is not quite pertinent, but at the farther end, I guess there's a place people can spread ashes for their loved ones or something like that. It's a cemetery, they're running out of space, so I guess. So anyways, but I'll find out where they got the grants to do a pollinator garden.
Mhm.
Oh, that's wonderful. We're gonna be looking for granting sources for funding, but me personally, I have no idea where to start, but I'm gonna jump in.
Yeah. I just found a website, Pollinator Partnership Racine. I'll send it to you. They've got 5 or 6 grant programs listed for pollinator gardens.
Perfect, lovely.
All right. Racine, was there any other updates for the AEC?
No, that's all I have.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Our last agenda item is any future business or new business, if anybody wants to bring that before the commission before we wrap up tonight. I just want to mention we didn't get to it on today's agenda, but obviously we still need to be working on our 2023 priorities. So maybe between now and our next meeting, we'll discuss those, but I'll open the floor to see if anybody has anything that they want to discuss at a future meeting.
I attended a couple weeks ago another ivy clearing event, this time at Quiet Waters Park down by the compost bins. There's a loop in the path, and we basically tackled the entire interior section of that loop down in that area, and cleaned a lot of ivy from that area. So that was a pretty successful afternoon. And I know that the Save Our Trees organization also conducted an event over at Broadneck Park where it's just chock full of English ivy. And I know they saved a lot of trees over there as well. So they're active and getting more active. So I encourage everybody to join them at their next event.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. I walk my dog around that composting circle, so I appreciate it. Hey, Linda, go ahead.
Hi there. Yeah, with Save Our Trees, they were here this Saturday in Hunt Meadow. And so I was out there for a couple hours with them, and so was Marianne Marbury. I'm surprised she's not here tonight. We saved like almost 100 trees in Hunt Meadow, and there's still a lot more to go. So, yeah, it is exciting to do it. It's a lot of manual labor, but you get to see the results as soon as all the ivy leaves start turning brown. You know you did a good job.
Yeah,
So
that's great. I went last weekend on a little, in knowing that the Environmental Matters Committee had requested a presentation from the AEC at their next meeting about the plastic bag ban. I went on a little reconnaissance mission to find some urban tumbleweeds, as I call them, plastic bags around Annapolis. And I'll just say that once you start looking for them, you see them everywhere. And so if any of you are, traveling around the city over the next week or so and see bags in the environment, just, take a quick photo if you want, and send them my way, because we can include those as examples in our presentation to the Environmental Matters Committee. And then obviously pick them up after. But photos, I think, would be helpful to just sort of explain that it's still an ongoing problem when we speak to them. Alrighty, well, we can wrap things up now if there is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, hearing none, we can adjourn the February 2023 meeting of the AEC. Thank you everyone for being here tonight, and thank you for all of our guest speakers for joining us. And as always, thank you.